Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day today, and we pray that you'll bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. I almost said beautiful day. We haven't had too many of those here this spring. But so today I'm going to title this, When Arsonists Advocate for Fire Prevention. Now, I want to tell you that I'm not always the most creative guy in the world. Here are some, by the way, some of the channels that we're on. If you want to look those up, and we are working on the podcast thing. We hope to have that moving along here very, very soon. It's just, we're all volunteers, so it's hard to get the time together and do these things. We talk about the convergence of events, how quickly things are happening, but back to the title today. So I'm not always the most creative. Sometimes somebody will send me a clever thought for a title. And then sometimes I'm reading an article and something will leap out at me. And I was reading an article from a magazine publication called the Chicago Thinker. It's published by conservatives at the University of Chicago. So I guess all two or three of them get together and publish this. And there was and I'll play a clip of it in just a moment, but there was a seminar this week that the Atlantic held. And it was about misinformation and disinformation in media. And so they invited the paragons of truth. I mean, you'll see a clip from Ann Applebaum. Jonah Goldberg was there whining about things like he does anymore. I guess David French was busy, tending his flower garden or something. Remember when he was a conservative? It wasn't too long ago. But Ann Applebaum was there. Panel was moderated by David Axelrod, the former chief of staff for the president, who also showed up. Some would say the current president, Barack Obama. Now, I'm going to show some mercy on you. I'm not going to play the clip of Obama, but you can find it if you just go to YouTube and look for Atlantic, Chicago, misinformation or disinformation in media, you'll be able to find the videos. And so in response to that, and I'm grateful for these young conservatives and thinkers that go to these conferences and ask people questions and demand an answer. And so after that, I don't remember who wrote this at the Chicago Thinker, but I thought this was good opening, and this is where I got the title from. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to attend a fire prevention speech delivered by an arsonist? Or perhaps a child safety seminar led by a pedophile? Or somebody from Disney? Or the new Supreme Court justice? Well, that's exactly what it felt like Wednesday during the University of Chicago's Conference on Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy, featuring some of the greatest promulgators of disinformation and illiberalism in American history. So bravo, that's somebody, and you'll see the question asked by one of these young lions, I guess, that we talk about. But we talk this is sort of the grid that I use, acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding, as we kind of started to piece all these different Bible prophecy passages together. And as we get closer, of course, hopefully, we'll be able to understand, because this is what it talks about in Daniel chapter 12, verse 8. And I heard, but I understood not. So Daniel, he didn't understand. He's watching all these things. What's going on? Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And leading up to that, there's also this passage we talk about a fair amount here, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. So when you understand that we live, and I think we can say we live in a pretty dark world, but they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And we know that on a secular level, information is increasing exponentially. I drove out this week past that. I talk about it a lot because it creeps me out every time I go out there. I appreciate the people who are working out there, but the Facebook server farms out there on Beach Road in New Albany, and then across the road now, they're building, Facebook has 6 buildings, either built or under construction. The 6th one is supposed to be, my understanding, is dedicated to artificial intelligence. Each building, I'm going to guess 6 stories tall, maybe 5-6 stories tall, but 1,200 feet long. I mean, almost a quarter of a mile long. And they're just filled with racks of computers and servers to store all the bits and bytes of information that Facebook borrows from us when we peruse things on Facebook. And they need all those computers. But across the road, whereas Facebook spent about $1.2 billion to build those, across the road, Google is spending about $2.5 billion building server farms. And there, across the road from Facebook now is, we have all those distribution facilities around town because we're sort of in the center of the country demographically. But it's got to be close to, if not the largest truck warehouse distribution facility that I've ever seen. And it's got the big name Amazon on it. When I was out there about a year ago, that thing wasn't even under construction. And then, of course, to the east of there, they're going to spend $20 to $100 billion building an Intel chip manufacturing facility. And they're calling it the Silicon Heartland. So knowledge is all around Columbus. I mean, there's server farms elsewhere in Columbus. I hear it's because we're near the main branch of the internet trunk lines, and they sort of intersect, they sort of parallel Interstate 70 and 71, and they intersect in someplace in a secure building around downtown Columbus. So there's a lot of information flowing through here. But then you wonder why does my cell phone call drop when all this information is around? But one of the ways of interpreting this passage is that knowledge shall increase. Notice that it doesn't say wisdom will increase, because we certainly don't see a lot of wisdom around these days. But there's 2 ways of looking at this. It can just mean the similar, there's just going to be a lot of information. But it can also mean as people go to and fro, back and forth through the book that God has left us, that there will be a greater understanding as we get closer to the end. Because we're going to see some of these things, I think, unfold right in front of us. And we can say, oh yeah, that's how it's going to work out. And right now we're sort of still, everybody's speculating, and I would suppose each week I get at least 1 to 3 books, book length, emails, articles, books, that type of thing, about somebody's view about how it's all going to work out. And maybe they're right. We'll see. We'll see. But how do we get to the place where what this writer at the Chicago Thinker said about this, would you invite an arsonist to do a fire prevention seminar? And how do we get there? And this thing has a parallel both in the secular world, the political world, the geopolitical world, and the church. Timothy, in 2 Timothy chapter 4, it talks about this. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn their ears away from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry. So this is one of the last things that Paul ever wrote. There's a recent study called The State of the Bible USA 2022, put out by the American Bible Society. And essentially what this survey finds is that this is people who use the Bible over time, like they engage with the Bible on a weekly basis. And do you see what's happened here in just the last year? That's not a very encouraging statistic there. And you can download that State of the Bible report and see what it says. Then they also have a thing that's called Scripture engagement. This is on a weekly basis. It's based on a survey. They assume people are telling them the truth. So they have kind of the Bible disengaged, people who don't really pay attention to the Bible. Scripture engaged, I think, is 3, 4, 5 times you refer to the Bible during the week. And then there's sort of the movable middle. But so look at the numbers, though, in 2022, which is the green. What you see almost a 50% increase in the number of people who are disengaged from the Bible now. Now, does that help you understand a little bit about what's going on in our culture? The movable middle, you can see it went from, and I think those are numbers of 95 million to 66 million. And Scripture engaged has fallen to 49 million. So if you look at the people, if you add those two together, you're over 200 million, and you have maybe 50 million that are engaged with the Bible a few times a week. So that means 4 times as many. And look at the change that we've seen from 2021 to 2022. It's not encouraging. And there's an answer to that. And so because of that, I could bring you clip after clip. I bring you clips of Andy Stanley. I could bring you clips of pastors who are engaged with this thing, and I've done a talk on it. It's probably been a couple of years now. The Enneagram, this sort of new age psychological thing that's come into the church, promoted big time by Andy Stanley. I have people that tell me he doesn't. He does. He really does. Go back and watch my talks on him. He actually does. He actually gave out a coupon to pastors at his conference back in Dallas in 2015. I've got the downloadable experience kit. You can still find it if you know how to use archive.org on the internet. And so you have that, and it just doesn't get questioned. And if you do question it, you get marginalized pretty quickly. I know this. Believe me, I know. As you know, a lot of us around here know that from personal experience. And so when you're disengaged from the Scripture, you end up with this. I believe this is a PCUSA church. Now, we know that that's an apostate denomination. But this is a church service that they had. This is out in Iowa. And if you look at those statistics, you can understand how this happens. I'm not making, I always say, I'm not making it up. This has really happened. That's why I show you the videos. I show you the clips of what the people say. Listen to this.
This past Thursday, March 31st, was the International Transgender Day of Visibility. In the PCUSA, we welcome all of our transgender and queer siblings into this family and relationship with the Creator God. So today, I wish to pray a prayer that was written for this incredible day. Will you pray with me? O God of pronouns, we give praise to the Great One, the one who is identifiable as God. I am what
I don't know if that guy's looking to see, where is she getting this from? I hope he's doing that.
The incarnate he and she, the God of trans being. Impregnating Mary, fathering God, breastfeeding God of many breasts, you shatter all stereotypes, making every single person male and female. Male and female, intersex, non-binary, in your image, exactly in your image. Spectrum, rainbow God, who put your promise for nonviolence in the symbol for queer love before humanity knew, because you knew. Who had Joseph, who could not sleep with a woman, in a beautiful lady's cloak, perhaps of rainbow colors.
Maybe he's wondering if a
Before we
lightning
knew.
bolt is going to
You
hit.
knew.
I'll let that go.
God of pronouns who
But you understand that this is a problem. This is a symptom, and I'm going to show you some things. Now, I did a midweek update this week. I'm going to play some of those clips again of Yuval Harari, because I think what he says is very important in understanding what's going on. But you can go get I did it Thursday, I put it up, and I can't remember what I titled it, but you can find it on our YouTube channel and on Rumble. And I know it's been posted some other places by some other, RTN, I think, has it up, RTN TV. But understand that this is what's happening. And so here's what's happening is that this is from the Washington Post, I believe this morning. Alabama lawmakers passed bills curbing rights of transgender kids. So someone from, and so a lot of conservatives are going, why are you talking to our kids about this stuff? Why do you think it's okay to talk to a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6, 7, 8-year-old about this? There's a website called amaze.org or something like that, and it's all these videos teaching kids about sex. It's cartoons, and I would say, just take my word for it, don't bother going there, because some of them are rather explicit, and they're directed at kids. I mean, when I was 6 years old, I was like, how do I hit a fastball or a curveball? That was what really I was obsessing about. But you see what we're doing is we're sexualizing our children. So when conservatives say, that's when you start sexualizing children, that sounds like grooming. And so someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene will say, stop doing this to our children. The immediate response on Twitter, people have no control on anything anymore. They just say, she's talking pre-genocide language. She wants all of us to be killed. No, we want you to be saved, not killed, okay? But we want you to leave the kids alone. And so Alabama puts in place this law, as a number of many other states, Florida, and they're really parent rights or child protection acts, but they call them "Don't Say Gay." They hate transgenders and that type of thing, and it even gets the attention of the White House press secretary. So, warning if you want to fast forward a minute and a half, but I'm going to play it because I think you need to understand this is an opening part of a White House press briefing on Thursday.
Across the country, as we've talked about a bit in here, Republican elected officials are engaging in a disturbing, cynical trend of attacking vulnerable transgender kids for purely partisan political reasons. Today in Alabama, instead of focusing on critical kitchen table issues like the economy, COVID, or addressing the country's mental health crisis, Republican lawmakers are currently debating legislation that, among many things, would target trans youth with tactics that threatens to put pediatricians in prison if they provide medically necessary, life-saving health care for the kids they serve. Just like the extreme government overreach we've seen in Texas, where politicians have sent state officials into the homes of loving parents to investigate them for abuse just to harass and intimidate the LGBTQI plus community, today's vote in Alabama will only serve to harm kids. But Alabama's lawmakers and other legislators who are contemplating these discriminatory bills have been put on notice by the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services that laws and policies preventing care that healthcare professionals recommend for transgender minors may violate the Constitution and federal law. To be clear, every major medical association agrees that gender-affirming healthcare for transgender kids is a best practice and potentially life-saving. All of this begs an important question. What are these policies actually trying to solve for? LGBTQI plus people can't be erased or forced back into any closets, and kids across our nation should be allowed to be who they are, without the threat that their parents or their doctor could be imprisoned simply for helping them and loving them. President Biden has committed in both words and actions to fight for all Americans and will not hesitate to hold these states accountable.
Okay, so like they're doing so great on the food, inflation, and gas thing. They're the ones who are pushing it in the schools. Rule of law, rule of life, it's rising to almost number one. They will always accuse you of doing what they do. Distracting. And they're tearing it all down. So I stand by my title, When Arsonists Advocate for Fire Prevention. This is a perfect example of it. Imagine what she's going to be like when she gets over to MSNBC, where she doesn't have any brakes on her. I'm serious. So the rule that she talked about, the U.S. Justice Department, the Department of Justice, it needs to be renamed. They put out a letter saying, listen, all of you states who are enacting these laws, we're going to come after you. You're discriminating against these people because you won't prescribe off-label drugs. I thought we weren't supposed to do that in America anymore. None of these drugs are approved for this. None of these drugs have had long-term studies done. And they're giving them to kids. And I don't care if it's 4 kids in the whole country, but it's not. The statistics in England show that it's hundreds. Here's what this letter says. Because a government cannot discriminate against a person for being transgender without discriminating against the individual based on sex. And it's a lie that that's what that statute provided for. It's a bold-faced lie. This makes me so mad. State laws or policies that discriminate against transgender people must be substantially related to a sufficiently important governmental interest, like protecting children, like not sterilizing children, like not mutilating them. And I saw somebody in one of the Twitter threads, somebody said, well, I read an article, I read a thing about some gal who, she was a girl, she'd had top surgery, she had her breast removed, and then she regretted it. The stories are all over the place. And you know what the person said? There's nobody that does that. That's not true. That's not true. And so when you see enough of this, you know what it means in Romans chapter 1, that people are given over to a reprobate mind. And boy, are we ever divided. But if we're going to divide on this, put a stake in the ground and divide on this. But of course, now they're on message. Now they've got to send the Secretary of Transportation to The View to talk about this. How about fixing the gas prices, Pete Buttigieg? But here's the question on The View, and I want you to listen carefully, because she's going to set it up. Well, your husband says this, his husband, about what these laws do. Do you agree with that? And listen to what he says. And so this is what our transportation secretary does, and then it's a diversion. Just listen to it.
Talking about attacks on LGBTQ+, your husband, Chasten, is a teacher.
She forgot IA, too, by the way.
And he's been a vocal critic of what's going on in my state of Florida with the so-called Don't Say Gay law now, which he says will kill kids. Do you agree? And, as a politician, because this strikes you as, your husband is a teacher.
Yeah.
You are obviously LGBTQ yourself, and you are now a parent.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about this?
He's right. And I think every law ought to be judged for the effect it's going to have on real people in real life. And I get the political reasons why they're doing this. By the way, some of those political reasons is they don't have a plan on anything else, right? I mean, they don't have a plan on dealing with inflation or dealing with gas prices. If they can keep trying to go out there and ban books, we're going out there figuring out how to build bridges, literally.
Do you see the connection that he made there, building bridges? And do you think that your husband says they're going to kill kids? I agree with him. And we give this guy a salary? And he's the transportation secretary, for crying out loud. Listen, you could dispute the studies, but Peter McHugh came out. He was the lead psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins University, where they did the first transgender sex change operations in the world. And they did hundreds of them. They stopped doing them. Why? Because they found that the people that they had done, he talked about it in the Wall Street Journal, he's done articles, there's a pediatric association, there's videos, they haven't been taken down yet, on YouTube that you can find. He said they're 22 times more likely to commit suicide if they have these surgeries than if they don't. There's whole studies have been done in England. You don't think it's real? The Daily Caller was able to get access to some emails of a Texas teacher, 4th grade, in Austin, Texas. And they found, looking through her emails, you can find the article at Daily Caller, she claimed that 20 out of 32 students in her class, 4th grade class, identified as LGBTQ. The Cass report came out in the UK, and they surveyed, what happens to people, cognitive, emotional, and psychosocial functioning of girls treated with pharmacological puberty blockage for idiopathic central precocious puberty. This is a survey of the literature. Yeah, and they sort of summarized all the literature in the title, I know. But look at what they say in their conclusion. The similarities between the findings of these two studies strengthens their reliability and increases the possibility that hormone puberty blocker treatment may have an adverse impact on cognitive functioning in children. And what they found in each of these studies, separate studies done different places, IQ levels, points went down between 7 and 9 points in children that have been treated with these puberty blockers. Even our Department of State has to weigh in. They now have officially rolled out, starting April 11, which is tomorrow, you can get a passport marked with an X where gender goes. It has other practical aspects. This is the New York City Health CMO, who was writing about some of the things that they're doing in New York City. And look at what she says. We need to support birthing people through all aspects of their birthing experience. Okay? We can share with birthing people the urgency of this moment. Mortality rates of birthing people are too high. And she also says the babies born to non-Hispanic white birthing people, but even she can't get it right. Because when she said, and babies born to Black and Puerto Rican mothers. She lost all of her intersectionality points by referring to a person who gives birth as a mother. And you would think, well, why do you point this out? Because they're insane. They've been driven mad. It's spiritual, it's demonic. So when this thing comes up and you see them talking about you see this all the time. These laws are killing kids. Don't say gay. And the answer is, you know what? What people want those laws to do is to stop abusing children. That's what they want. Now, it doesn't save the kids. You still got to teach them about the Lord and that type of thing. But listen, you've got an obligation to protect your kids, right? You don't let your kids play out on the interstate. It's dangerous. David Brooks, writing in the New York Times Sunday Review section this morning, talked about the fact a new world takes shape. The culture wars have gone global. And we saw this week. There was an election in Hungary, and Viktor Orban won by a pretty wide margin. I saw an interview with David Goldman, who used to write under the name Spengler at Asia Times, really one of the more intelligent people I've seen. And he did a hour and 15-minute discussion with Caroline Glick this week about things going on in the world and Ukraine and Russia and everything. But at one point he said, he said Orban he's met him, and he says that he's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Now that's something coming from David Goldman, who's one of the most intelligent people I've ever read. And part of what Orban is trying to do in Hungary is restore these values. Now, he's by the way, he's been neutral on the Ukraine-Russia thing. So what is he labeled? What is he called? Oh, you're pro-Putin. You're a Putin lover. And you can't have a discussion that one of the quotes in the article, you can go read it, is with 44% of American high school students reporting persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, our culture isn't exactly the best advertisement for Western values right now. So David Brooks is right. We are in a global cultural war. It's a clash of civilizations. And the problem is that the different parts, I think it's China, Russia versus the neoliberal, with scare quotes, West, are the two main things. There's a lot not to like about any of them, really. One of the things that they're doing is they're trying to tear down the nation state. Orban is a nationalist. But who's trying to tear down the nation state? Migrants surge at the border. This is from today's New York Times. As migrants surge at the border, Biden aides fought each other. Now, that's the best news in the New York Times today. That there are people actually in the Biden administration that disagree with this, what's going on at the border. They're going to get rid of Title 42, which are the Charlie vector health restrictions that allow them to turn people away. And they're talking that starting May, you could see 500 to 600,000 illegals coming across the southern border per month. And they put them on planes and fly them places. It's a fact. Now, if you bring it up with people like at this Atlantic-sponsored conference, Barack Obama and company dishonestly lecture University of Chicago students on disinformation. So go to the Chicago Thinker, thechicagothinker.com, which is the conservative University of Chicago student newspaper. It's very well done, by the way. They're smart kids. Actually, they have wisdom too. That's even better. So here's Ann Applebaum. She's talking with David Axelrod, and she'll be asked a question about Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, Ann Applebaum is, I'd call her center left. She's a good writer. She seems to be, I used to think she was kind of interested in how things worked in the world and the implication of things. But now I'm not so sure. So here's Ann Applebaum talking to David Axelrod, and then asked a very good question by a freshman at the University of Chicago.
Things that they remember from their childhood don't exist anymore. And one of the things that the Republican Party did successfully was sort of weaponizing that nostalgia, and that belief.
But we should say, and I want to take this last question, the question from over here, but we should say that some of the themes that you articulated in other places were the same themes that were so powerful here with Republican or some Republican voters that helped propel the sort of populist right-wing.
Yes, no, there's we had an enormous period of political change, and then we have a backlash as people are uncomfortable with the change, and a part of the party understood that and used it and deepened it.
Let's take
Amazing. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. I'm Daniel Schmidt. I'm a freshman at the University of Chicago. My question is for Ms. Applebaum. So in 2020, you wrote, "Those who live outside the Fox News bubble do not, of course, need to learn any of the stuff about Hunter Biden," referring to his laptop, of course. A poll later after that found that if voters knew about the content of the laptop, 16% of Joe Biden voters would have acted differently. Now, of course, we know a few weeks ago, the New York Times confirmed that the content is real. Do you think the media acted inappropriately when they instantly dismissed Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation? And what can we learn from that in ensuring that what we label as disinformation is truly disinformation and not reality?
My problem with Hunter Biden's laptop is I think it's totally irrelevant. I mean, it's not whether it's disinformation or, I mean, I don't think the Hunter Biden's business relationships have anything to do with who should be president of the United States. So I don't find it to be interesting. I mean, that would be my problem with that as a major news story.
Okay, she didn't find it interesting. Isn't that wonderful? No, see, so this is the lawyer talking. When you ask a person a question and they do not answer it, you can almost just guarantee they're lying. You know? Now, sometimes they'll say something factually, very confidently, that answers the question, but you'll know you have documents that show something completely different. But when they avoid the question, they're lying. That's just a lie. She's lying here. Why? Because she's a coward. Because if she said, I think, what is really true, that, yeah, we blew it, she's going to get fired. So Washington Post, New York Times have now come out and said, 22,000 of the emails on the laptop have been authenticated, but there's 129,000. We don't know about the rest. Come on. Who's going to make up 107,000 emails with headers and information and that type of thing? Even the Russians don't do that. They don't have time. Do you know how long it takes to make up fake stuff? There's a bill in Canada in Ontario called C-67. And it's really to implement critical race theory in the province of Ontario. What do you think they're going to do with that? They've weaponized people who don't go along. They've weaponized the financial system against people who don't go along. There was some ministry, or it's a I think it's a Christian-related website. I cannot remember the name of it. I sent it to someone. And I clicked, they had a donate button. Now, I wasn't going to donate, Pam, so don't worry about it. But for some reason, I thought, so I clicked on it. And it brought up a PayPal page. And it said, you can't give to this organization through PayPal. They've been disabled. So now what did I conclude from that? This is probably a web page that I should follow. So it's just some things going on in the world. Shanghai, Shenzhen, over 50 million people locked down in Shanghai. Told to stay inside for 7 days. I'm going to show you a couple videos. On the left is a video taken of somebody just in an apartment. They've huge tower. Shanghai's one of the largest cities in the world, 26 million people. So they live in high rises. These are people who've been locked down. They're not allowed to leave their place for 7 days for any reason. There are reports of people that are starving because they're having an outbreak of the Charlie Vector thing. Listen to this. Just listen to what's going on from the cell phone.
这个是正常的叫，好了，终于2万人，所有人都在叫，要命了！就刚刚5分钟前头，叫完没几个了，现在突然之间，所有人都叫了，要死！
You see them flashing their phones and stuff? Like little spotlights out the windows? This is not good, my friends. What's it going to do to supply chains and that type of thing? They're having food riots. China's been hoarding a lot of metals, foodstuffs, commodities over the last number of years. Some grain stocks, they have 60% of the entire supply in the world. They make a lot of things. We buy a lot of stuff from China because we outsourced all of our industrial base to them. What's this going to do to supply chains? I'm just telling you, we're entering a period of time where you need to be very vigilant and very proactive in how you take care of yourself. By the way, in that earlier video where it said, where Jen Psuckerberger, Cruella von Psuckerberger, said that, you know, all major medical organizations oppose these bills. They've weaponized medicine. They're weaponizing law. Now, I don't know that she'll have that much impact right now, but that judge on the U.S. Supreme Court, you know, if people are still around here in 30 years, she's going to still be on the bench. She's not going to rule any case any way that you like. I can almost guarantee it. So at the World Government Summit this week, or last week, and I played some clips, I just have another clips. This is one of the videos that they put up about the new world order. So immediately, you know, Glenn Beck did a video about it, and he got a tag on it. This might be conspiracy theory information. This is a slide from a video that they played at the World Government Summit in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, on March 29th, 2022. It is a fact. Here is a little bit of the video.
There's no longer any doubt that humans are heating up the oceans, land, and sea by burning fossil fuels.
The world has to overcome not only the damage done to our economies and our societies by COVID-19, it also has to confront the repercussions.
سرعة التغيير القادمة أكبر بكثير مما نتوقع.
I see a future where the internet is available for free for everyone, and that means the location of power is going to shift. Decentralization of power structures everywhere may be the beginning of that shift in finance, in political power.
We have to uphold our responsibility, which we have towards the next generation.
So that's their video. I'll just put it up there without comment. I mean, here's the screenshot from the video. Another one. This one, there is no planet B. And this week they also came out with yet another big report, and all the UN people and climate change people were wetting their pants. It is now or never, the Guardian reports, if the world is to stave off climate disaster. So I'm going to, and look at this. This is a tweet from Dubai Cares. Look at what they say about the New World Order. The new education system to be unveiled on the sidelines of this is what they're talking about, of the new education system is set to be unveiled on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in September 2022 during the UN Transforming Education Summit to be convened by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And they type pound SDG4. What's SGD4? SGD4 is one of the Sustainable Development Goals that talks about education. They're going to put that out. So here's Becky, I think her name's Becky Anderson, who's talking, here's the question she had.
Are you ready for a new world order?
Now, one of the guys who spoke, and I covered this, so I'm going to play a little bit of the clips that I played because I think this is very important. This is Yuval Noah Harari. He's a gay professor at Tel Aviv University. I don't know if he's still teaching there. He's written a couple of books, 3 books actually. Homo Deus, Sapiens, I think was his first one, A Brief History of Humankind. Homo Deus was A Brief History of Tomorrow, and then his third book was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And it's interesting the way the book goes, it looks, is here, you see the fingerprint with the chip? It's not by mistake. So he did a talk back in 2015, and here's a talk, this was the first time I ever played a clip of his, was What Will the Future Be Human was the title of his talk at Davos 2018. So I've been playing, as you know, clips of him for over 4 years. And he talked about technology, and it was always interesting. Look at the image that he's using. What's he's trying to convey there? Do you see the religious thing that he's trying to convey? Because it looks like some of the images of Jesus that you would see. So he did a talk at Google in 2015 called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. I guess you could call this a brief history of Yuval Harari. But he did a TED Talk before that in 2014, and he's an atheist. I want you to listen how he thinks about God. Here is his TED Talk from 2014.
Humans cooperate flexibly in large numbers because humans can create imagined realities together. All other animals use their communication system in order to describe reality. A chimpanzee can say, look, there was a lion, run away. Or look, there was a banana, let's take it. Humans can use their language not only to describe reality, but also to create new realities, to create fiction. A human can say, look, there was a lion, or look, there was a banana. But a human can also say, look, there is a God above the clouds. And if you don't do what I tell you to do, God will punish you. And if you believe this fictional story, then you will do what you are told to do. And this is the secret behind large-scale human cooperation.
So he's big on the algorithms and everything, but in 2015 he went to Google and he did a talk at Google. Talks at Google, they're called. So these are the elite of Silicon Valley. I can play about a 3-minute clip of him. You need to listen very carefully to what he says. And then ask your question is, we know that Jesus comes what? On the clouds. But he talks about the God above the clouds and the cloud. But listen what he says at the beginning of his talk about why he likes coming to Silicon Valley.
It's a pleasure to be here also, not only to visit Ran and Ariel, but also to be in Silicon Valley, which for me is a kind of special place as a historian. As a historian, I focus mainly on the history of ideas, ideology, mythology, religion. And I think that the most interesting place in the world today, in religious terms, is Silicon Valley. Not the Middle East, not Syria or Afghanistan or Israel or Jerusalem, but Silicon Valley. This is where the new religions that will take over the world are being formulated. It's not an electronic algorithm, but what's the difference? The mathematics is the same. The calculations are basically the same. What's the matter, how it is actually, why does it matter how it is done? The second fallacy, which is part of it, is that most of these movies, not all of them, but most of them imagine it as a kind of war between humans and computers or humans and robots, when the far more likely scenario, which we are already seeing now, is not a war but a wedding. We are talking about a merger of the two kinds of algorithms, the biochemical and the electronic, not a struggle, or not necessarily. The life sciences are currently, most of them, have this dogma that, okay, we don't know how to explain it, but in 20 or 30 or 50 years, with more experiments, more knowledge, we will understand how electrochemical signals are transformed into subjective experiences. But at present, in 2015, this is just dogma. Still today, we don't have a clue how electrochemical patterns can turn into subjective experiences. Maybe the life sciences have got it wrong. Maybe humans and other animals are not reducible to algorithms. This is an open question. However, in historical terms, it's not as important as you might think, because a religion or an ideology does not have to be correct in what it says in order to take over the world. We have many cases previously in history when religions and ideologies, which said what we think today to be completely erroneous things about the world, nevertheless managed to take it over. In scientific terms, the story, for example, that Christianity tells about the world, how the world was created, how humans were created, how things work in the world, it's not true. It's simply not true, at least according to science. But this did not prevent Christianity from taking over most of the world. So you don't need the truth to take over the world. Similarly, with these new data religions, maybe they are based on a misunderstanding of life, but this will not necessarily prevent them from taking over the world.
So the algorithms, you understand, he's atheist. He does not like Christianity. I don't know him. You know, I probably could sit down and have, even he sold 40 million books. He should buy dinner if we ever have dinner. But I just see an angry, God-hating person. I hate to be so judgmental. I mean, he had another talk where he goes, wouldn't it be great if we had an app that you could just, take to a party? You didn't have to try to figure out if somebody was gay. You could just kind of look at the app and it would tell you if the person across the room was gay or whatever. Here he is in 2018 at Davos. Will the future be human?
Science is replacing evolution by natural selection with evolution by intelligent design. Not the intelligent design of some god above the clouds, but our intelligent design and the intelligent design of our clouds, the IBM cloud, the Microsoft cloud. These are the new driving forces of evolution. And at the same time, science may enable life after being confined for 4 billion years to the limited realm of organic compounds. Science may enable life to break out into the inorganic realm.
And then here he is speaking in 2020 at the Athens Democracy Forum, sponsored by the New York Times. By the way, you can go out there, you can find all kinds of videos from him. I think he's very important. I did the video the other day. It's gotten some traction. We always talk in Bible prophecy terms, is he the false prophet? Well, I don't know. But he's got a religion he calls Dataism. He actually did an interview with an editor from the Financial Times at Davos 2018. Didn't know what to call it. We'll call it Dataism. That's the God that he worships. The big server farm, the big computer, the algorithm, and that sort of thing. And now, here's what he said about what's gone on, was starting back in 2020 with all of these lockdowns that we see continuing today.
No, I think maybe in a couple of decades when people look back, the thing they will remember from the COVID crisis is this is the moment when everything went digital. And if this was the moment when everything became monitored, that we agreed to be surveyed all the time, not just in authoritarian regimes, but even in democracies. And maybe most importantly at all, this was the moment when surveillance started going under the skin. Because really we haven't seen anything yet. I think the big process that's happening right now in the world is hacking human beings, the ability to hack humans, to understand deeply what's happening within you, what makes you go. And for that, the most important data is not what you read and who you meet and what you buy, it's what's happening inside your body. So we had these two big revolutions, the computer science revolution, or the infotech revolution, and the revolution in the biological sciences. And they are still separate, but they are about to merge. They are merging around, I would say, the biometric sensor. It's the thing, it's the gadget, it's the technology that converts biological data into digital data that can be analyzed by computers. And having the ability to really monitor people under the skin, this is the biggest game changer of all.
So what do you think? Do you understand where we are on this timeline? There's no going back to normal. I think I said at the beginning in 2020, boy, for the good old days of 2019, and then 2021, oh, for the good old days of 2020, and then early in 2021, I think I said, oh, for the good old days of 2020. And so how far are we getting into 2022 before we're saying, can we go back to 2021? And this is the way the world is with all of these things. Now, look, I'm not going to say too much about this. I will tell you this. I understand where people are coming from. I am not a fan of Vladimir Putin. Okay? I'm not a fan of Zelensky. I wish they could have worked this thing out beforehand. I think that the way the U.S. is moving, it's doing things, it seems to be prolonging what's going on there. People are dying. People are going into a crisis eternity by the thousands. Cities reduced to rubble. And, so this is one image that somebody put up was chessboard. And I found it interesting. I've made up a graphic similar to this for the Middle East myself. I found this video kind of interesting. Putin and the world leaders, you can see Biden and Johnson and some of the others there playing chess. And it's kind of humorous in a way, the way he plays chess. No, you can't do that. And so what does he do? So I think it's a very well done piece because it shows what's going on. I mean, here's a country with a tenth of the GDP of the United States that ranks 88th in the world in annual income, gross per capita income, and they've got all of these. I'm taking my chess piece and go home. So I think it's a funny video. Because I think it shows what's going on. And he's got nuclear weapons. He's got hypersonic missiles. And those are game changers. I don't know that he needed to use a hypersonic missile or a few in Ukraine. And the propaganda from both sides is unbelievable. But, so there's people killed in a suburb of Kiev, and the Ukrainian government comes out and says, look how terrible this is. And you see the dead bodies laying on the street. There's no doubt that this happened. And then the Russians come out and say, we didn't do any of that. We didn't do any of that. Now, they finally admitted that some of their top military personnel and generals and stuff are being killed. Question is, how many? Ukrainians say 19,000. The Russians don't say. If you talk about it as a war in Russia, you're put in prison. So it's very difficult to figure out what the truth is. I would just urge people to be cautious about believing anything that Vladimir Putin says. Really, anybody that's saying about this. I'm not on the ground there. I do hear from some people that give me a different story than what the Russian line is. And sometimes give me a different story than what the Ukrainians say. So yesterday there was a missile that was shot into a crowd waiting to evacuate in eastern Ukraine at a train station. 50 people were killed. And immediately, everybody's saying, oh, look at how mean the Russians are. Look at what they did. And then I'm getting emails from people saying, that was the Ukrainians did that. Now, they never cite me an article, so I researched, and I did find a person who posted on a Reddit page that, yeah, there was a serial number that indicated it came from the Ukraine stock of these missiles. But when I clicked on it, the post had been taken down. So is it true or not? I don't know. And then there's people, everybody on the internet's got to be the first one to talk about it rather than being the first one that's right. So let's see how this plays out, okay? All I know is that the world order that we knew a little while ago has changed. And now there's this battle for who's going to control it. But there's impacts from this. For example, the conflict worsens Russia's population crisis. Russia has a demographic problem. Peter Zahn, who I think is a pretty good geopolitical analyst, I played you a clip of his the other day, or a couple weeks ago, and he said Russia really, if they're going to do this, they needed to do it now because they have a big demographic problem. The word that I get from military people is that 40% of the Russian military is Muslim right now. They brought Chechen Muslim militias into Ukraine. And I'm just asking, could they do what happened in Bucha, the suburb of Kiev? You better believe it, they could. These guys are brutal. They're like the Islamic State. And don't tell me that they're not. Because if you do, you don't know what you're talking about. If you want to talk about, neo-Nazis in Ukraine, that's fine. There are some, I'll admit that. But you understand the Chechen rebels? Do you remember the attack on the school? Now those people flipped over to the pro-Russian side. The attack on that school in Chechnya, what was it, 300 died, children? They held them for a couple weeks. So don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Look at how the population, if you could see how the population is aging, and the younger people, look on the male side, that's shrinking. This is a problem. Excess deaths way above what's been reported from Charlie Vector. Huge population decline. And they had a problem before then. China has a population problem. We have a population problem. Europe has a population problem. That's one of the factors I think that plays into maybe this is the time where all this stuff is going to wrap up, because Iran has one of the worst birth rates on the planet. So if they're going to do something that we see in the pages of Bible prophecy, maybe they're going to act sooner rather than later, because they know what's going on in their country. Putin knows what's going on in his country. He's a smart guy. He really is. And he has this, if you go back and look at some of my other talks, for goodness sakes, back in 2014, I was talking about an article I found in Foreign Affairs magazine, and it's published by the Council on Foreign Relations. I know all about them and the Trilateral Commission. And by the way, the Trilateral Commission, if you never hear about them anymore, right? Well, it's the World Economic Forum. I think it's morphed into that. So, but this is causing a problem. It's causing all these collapse in increase in food prices, collapse in food supplies. Here are the rising prices associated with Russia's military operation. Wheat up 28%, corn 3%, up 22%. Put all these sanctions on Russia, by the way. The value of the ruble now is above what it was before Putin invaded. So much for the sanctions doing a lot of work. And I think it was in the Financial Times I saw an article that said that Putin's going to reap a windfall just in the near term of $321 billion because of the increase in the price of oil. Germany comes out and says, Aldi's going to be raising a lot of its prices 20 to 50% per item. They're talking about rationing in Germany. They're talking about rationing in the Netherlands. Sweden and Finland are looking at what's going on, and they want to join NATO. Now, they've tried to stay out of it for all this time. They live on the border. They don't like what's going on. The Baltic states, they don't like what's going on. They're concerned. Poland is concerned. And then you have this guy named Alexander Dugin, who is identified as Putin's Rasputin advisor, who talks about this great Eurasian landmass from Vladivostok to Britain, controlling the world island. That comes out of a geopolitical study by a geography guy named Halford Mackinder back in the early 1900s. We've talked about that before. We've talked about that for 15 years. These are the top wheat exporting countries in millions of tons. You see Russia, number one, US, Canada, France, and Ukraine. So add Russia and Ukraine together, and it says 30% of the world wheat exports are provided by Russia and Ukraine. And what's the articles that I'm seeing today? No grain's leaving Ukraine or Russia right now. They can go by ship. Can't get it on a ship, go through the Black Sea because they can't get insurance. Another one that's big is sunflower oil. Look at this. So 52% of the global export market of sunflower oil production comes from Russia and Ukraine. 50 countries depend on Russia and Ukraine for 30% or more of the grain and oil seeds they import. Wheat is the staple food for over 35% of the world's population. All of the countries in the Middle East get about over 50% to 80% of their wheat from Russia and Ukraine. If that's not planted this year, there are already a couple places in the world, Peru, which I think supplies a lot of fruits and vegetables to the United States. I see this comes from Peru in the store all the time. Having food riots. Sri Lanka, food riots, debt crisis. Here it says Egypt, Turkey, Bangladesh, and Iran are the world's top wheat importers, buying over 60% of their wheat from Russia and Ukraine. 40% of wheat supplies from the Black Sea region go to the Middle East and Africa. This is a big problem, friends. Don't be too dismissive of it. This is the darker areas are bigger wheat producing areas in Ukraine. Right now, I don't know what his he doesn't share with me his strategy as to what he's trying to do. There's been somewhat of a retreat in these regions in the Middle East or in Ukraine. And I don't know. It appears they're concentrating on the east. And some people think this is what he wanted to do all along, is take over the eastern part of Ukraine, which is where they have a lot of their coal, other minerals, and wheat production. And they'll just take control of that. By the way, nobody's messed with the gas pipelines that go across Ukraine. Why? Because, well, Ukraine supposedly was getting money from that. I don't know if they can get that. The whole thing is it's just one big, crazy mess. Will there be a backlash against the dollar? Who knows? So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Look, over the past few weeks, there have been a lot of terrorist attacks in Israel. This is very disturbing. It's a major crisis. In the meantime, though, they've been having these peace conferences. They had one with Egypt. Israel had one with Egypt in the Sharm el-Sheikh down in the Sinai, and then less than a week later, one came together with people from 4 Arab countries, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, can't remember the other one, in the Negev. And so things happened there that were in conjunction with that. And one of the mistakes, and understand that there's this Abraham Accords. You got to learn about the Abraham Accords because they're very important in all of this end time thing, I believe. And we talk about it. There's this heavy economic component to it. And that concerns me. And some of the people that I know that teach Bible prophecy, they're concerned about it too. I mean, we're all for peace, right? We all want economic prosperity. But there's if you look at Psalm 83, and we can argue whether that's a prophecy or not, but there's a certain treachery about it, behind these countries. And it just makes me very suspicious as to what is going on. And so here they are meeting, and then what did they do here is they've invited Tony Blinken to come to these meetings, to meet with them. I mentioned Caroline Glick's article about this from Israelite Home a week ago Friday. She said this in the article: in a situation where the Arabs of the land of Israel, in Gaza, Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, and the Negev, the Galilee, and the Dam Block are unwilling to accept the Jewish state at any border, the concept of division into two states is hostile to Israel. And now what do we have? We have the situation where the Israel government has essentially collapsed. I don't think I have a graphic on that. It was 61 to 59, and a member of the Yamina party, Naftali Bennett's party, left the coalition, which means it's 60-60, and now they may be headed to new elections. And this, if you follow world events, you'll notice that there's a lot of turmoil and everything is confusing. Here's a picture of the electrical system in Lebanon. And that's kind of a good picture of what is going on in the world, right? It's a mess. So here's a few clips. So they have this thing, they have the thing with Egypt. So then they're going to have this peace thing with the 4 Arab countries down in the Negev, and they invite Tony Blinken to come. I have no idea what they're thinking when they do this. Here, I want to put another video in here. And Blinken is they're negotiating. We've assigned to Russia the voting on the how to negotiate the Iran deal while we're sanctioning them. The whole thing is just, to say that this is all insane is crazy. So the first thing that Blinken does is he meets with Naftali Bennett in Jerusalem, and here's what he had to say. Because Israel knows we can't do this two-state thing. So they've got this meeting coming up, so why did they invite Blinken anyway? The United States is not for Israel. The government is not for Israel. Here's what Blinken said with Naftali Bennett.
I also made clear the conviction that the United States has that Israelis and Palestinians deserve to enjoy equal measures of freedom, security, opportunity, and dignity. And that's one of the principal reasons we support a negotiated two-state solution.
Look at
Our administration is also rebuilding America's relationship with the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people, something I'll continue to do today in Ramallah with President Abbas and in East Jerusalem with leaders of that community's vibrant and diverse civil society. We're increasing humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, totaling...
So I don't know why he just stood there. I mean, if he really cared about Israel, grow a spine, man. You were in the service. I've seen you talk boldly to CNN. Tell this guy, we don't agree with anything you're saying. Go home. So what did they do? They went to see Mahmoud Abbas. I had a very productive meeting, got to meet with him in Ramallah, and this is a short clip of what he said when he was in Ramallah with Mahmoud Abbas.
At the heart of all of this is an ongoing, enduring commitment to the basic principle of a two-state solution.
So there he goes again. So they go down there, they have this meeting, it's all handshakes and that type of thing. David Wormser has a great couple articles. And he said, listen, what the Arabs are looking for is the strong man. And they used to believe it was the United States. They don't believe that now. So now they're looking to Israel. And Israel had a perfect opportunity to do this. And so Blinken comes and goes, well, yeah, we support the Abraham Accords and all that. But, we got to say this. So here is part one of Blinken's comments at the Negev summit.
Let me begin by joining Yair and all of my colleagues in condemning the horrific terrorist attack last night in Hadara, which killed 2 border police officers, both just 19 years old. On behalf of President Biden, the American people, we extend our heartfelt condolences to the loved ones of the victims, Yazin Falah and Sharil Abu Karat. No family should have to experience such loss. And we stand in absolute solidarity with our friends and partners against.
So again, Yair Lapid, who will soon probably be the caretaker prime minister if they move towards elections. And then this is so they have this thing set up perfectly to further the Abraham Accords. And here is what Blinken said with all these Arab foreign ministers there.
Abraham Accords are making the lives of people across your countries more peaceful, more prosperous, more vibrant, more integrated. They're allowing governments to focus their energies and attentions on the issues that are actually affecting the lives of our citizens and making them better. The United States has and will continue to strongly support a process that is transforming this region and beyond. We'll help to strengthen the bonds between Israel and its circle of friends, both those with which it has normalization agreements and those with which it has long-standing peace treaties, like Egypt and Jordan. To name one example, later today, officials from the United States, the UAE, and Israel will launch the Religious Coexistence Working Group to counter intolerance and promote understanding. And will help widen the circle of friendship to include other countries interested in securing greater peace and prosperity for their own people. As we do, we have to be clear that these regional peace agreements are not a substitute for progress between Palestinians and Israelis. One of the issues we discussed today was how countries involved in the Abraham Accords and normalization, as well as those that have long-standing diplomatic relationships with Israel, can support the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people in concrete ways and have a positive impact on the daily lives of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza.
So this is an article from in the Jerusalem Post, and it just says that, you know, we got to go through Washington to get this regional alliance on track to oppose Iran. But we're not doing anything. There were a number of editorials. This is in the Saudi Arab News. Dire need for an Arab NATO, which is something that Trump had come up with back about 2018, I think. And then that sort of was the foundational thing that led to these Abraham Accords. And you notice the other thing that Blinken said was part of this agreement, the religious aspect, tolerance, Abraham House of Faiths, that type of thing that we've talked a lot about. You see how it's all connected? So this author says this: with the political and security changes currently taking place in the world and the expected future alliances, it has become necessary for the countries of the Middle East and North Africa to make essential security and military decisions to maintain the region's stability. The implications of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the unified international economic sanctions against Moscow, and the possibility of reaching a new nuclear agreement with Iran will definitely increase the extent and seriousness of the upcoming security challenges in the region. Reviving this joint, the JCPOA with the Iranian regime will open Tehran's money spigot, enriching its proxy militias in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and maximizing their influence and atrocities against what the Iranian regime considers to be hostile governments and their innocent citizens. The US and European conflict with Russia has highlighted the importance of NATO in protecting its members against any possible military threats. But then the question is, what are we actually doing? We're sending them some weapons. We don't have any troops. We don't have any military there. And I'm not saying that we should, but I'm just saying is you see how this impacts Ukraine, Russia impacts Middle East, which is significant prophetically. The idea of a Middle East security alliance, the author of this article in the Arab News says, is not new. been kicking around since the 1950s. The Baghdad Pact, which only had one Arab member, Iraq, alongside Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, and the UK, lasted about 2 decades. So she identifies a few problems. Not a true relationship of equals. The second problem would be the role of Israel, since Israeli-Palestinian issues will always complicate such an arrangement. And the third issue is the lack of trust between the countries in the region. And something needs to be done to fix this. However, she says, even with these valid points, an active Arab coalition is badly needed to deter the genuine Iranian threat and future Russian influence and interference in the region. They're looking for somebody to come in and solve this problem. Do you see that? A unified defensive military plan, the deployment of effective missile systems in the countries of this alliance, shared intelligence, and a ready-to-go multinational force would be ideal for securing the whole area and confronting radical terrorism. It is time for the moderate Middle Eastern countries to gain power by depending only on themselves and building joint capabilities to deter any threats coming their way. So here they are, they're going to increase cooperation and that type of thing. But then there's this problem. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Pay for slay a boss, takes his cue from Iran deal Blinken. And so people in Israel talk about, listen, what is going on? This is not good for us. And now we have, 4 terror attacks in the last couple of weeks? 15 people dead? Some of them Arabs, one Christian, some Jewish, stabbings, shootings. And the one thing they're finding is they're looking through this, it's like they're not finding any real connection between these people. Here's some headlines from just Friday or today about the terror attacks in Tel Aviv, where it says 2 killed, but 3 were. Young guys, families, children. Here's a picture of them from Israel Hayom this morning. Of course, it's now the month of peace, Ramadan. That's not working too well. This is from the New York Times. Wave of terror defies a simple narrative. That's this morning's newspaper. Hard to figure out what's going on. Jonathan Spire, just reference to a couple quick articles, and I'll play a clip from Caroline Glick and David Wormser's talk a week ago. The return of the jihad, that's Jonathan Spire's article. He says, listen, we've got these terror attacks. What's going on? And they're coming from within Arab society, and then the question becomes, who do you trust? And there's a lot of decent people that live in the Arab parts of Israel. But there also is a problem. Jonathan Spire concludes, nevertheless, the presence of large Sunni Arab populations which remain unrepresented by any of the main power brokers currently cooperating or competing in the Middle East is one of the salient elements of the current regional situation. Complacency or indifference to this, perhaps based on an assumption that these populations have permanently internalized their defeat, would be misplaced. So in other words, they haven't given up, and these things need to be dealt with. I mentioned this the other day. So Seth Franzman has a good article talking about, well, what does the impact of, the United States doesn't seem, and I would disagree with Seth respectfully, that he says, well, the people on the right in the US, they don't want to have anything to do, a lot of them, with going into Ukraine. They just want to be isolationist. But he is correct in that this has a huge impact on Israel because we really rely on our relationship with the United States for protection. And the conclusion is, are you ready to go it alone, Israel? Because I don't see anything coming from this administration. And we're almost 3 years from a new one taking effect, if a new one takes effect. If we have elections, I don't even know that anymore. But they're concerned about the demographic problem. You see this from Israel Hayom on the Golan Heights. And so understand that there's a demographic shift that's taken place in the the Golan, I mean, look at the cities. This is what Russia and Syria did to Damascus and Ghouta and Aleppo. Look at these pictures and tell me that this is Russia and Syria that did this. I don't want anybody to say that it was us that did it. These are barrel bombs used by Russia. And that's General Breedlove from NATO back 6 years ago testifying in front of Congress and said, look, this is why there's migration into Europe. And understand what happened in Syria and the resultant migration that took place took a few years. They've done many times that amount in Ukraine in 6 weeks. I mean, we're talking, does this not look a little bit like some places in Ukraine? Now people say, well, Ukrainians are doing it to themselves. But David Goldman, I again highly recommend you listen to his talk with Caroline Glick. And I think about 13 to 16 minutes into that, I think it's episode 47 of the Caroline Glick show, Goldman says, look, this is how Russia does things. This is what they did to Chechnya. This is what they've done to Syria. This is a graphic I used a couple weeks ago of the migration there in the lower right, of how the migration went. But understand, they've done an order of magnitude of 4 times at least the number of people who've been forced out of Ukraine. And now Ukraine is telling its citizens, get out of the east. And the strategy of Russia may be to just empty the place out and then they can do what they want. And that has huge implications for everything. So here's Caroline talking to David Wormser a week ago. I'm going to jump into the middle of this. And let's see here. And I'll just play a few minutes of this because it's a good discussion about what the Arabs are looking for and what's going on with Israel and the implications.
On how to deal with the series of crises. And at the
It's very small writing for an old man to read.
It's so absurd that I thought that what he was really doing was providing an entree to Iran to become a dominant force inside of the Arab League, meaning that he was trying to make a separate peace with Iran at Israel's expense.
I don't know if it was at Israel's expense. It was definitely a misstep. I think from their point of view, they're looking at the Ukraine situation, and they believe that Russia has been pretty significantly weakened. And they believe that Assad is looking at that and is terrified and is afraid that his patron, his protector, is in a very weak position. So as a result, they think there may be an opportunity to wrench Assad away from the Russian orbit and seek a path to survival by coming to terms with Israel and coming to terms with them. I think it's entirely unrealistic, partly because Assad has no choice but to stay with that, number one. Number two, I'm not sure the Russians emerged as weak as we think they have, or even as the Arabs think they have. And third of all, Assad has another option, which is to become more dependent on Iran.
I mean, he was completely dependent on Iran until the Russians came in 2015.
Correct, and he can go back to being completely dependent on Iran.
And it's not as though Russia is going to leave its Eastern Mediterranean airfield and port anytime soon. So
Right.
I don't understand why this analysis would be.
One thing I've found dealing with the UAE is they don't understand the Levant. They are perplexed with the Palestinians. They don't like the Palestinians at all, but they don't really understand their politics or what's going on. They're really quite uninformed about some of the goings on, and they don't know the subtleties and the dangers. You see, the real danger of this offer of mediating with Assad is that the Americans will pick up on it as a new peace process. And then all of a sudden, you'll see very rapidly, faster than you can even realize it's happening, an American push that would be the Golan for Iranian removal from, not all from Syria, but just from the border areas of Syria with Israel. So Iran for the Golan.
And you don't think that the UAE understood that this was the implication of what they were saying? You think that they're that out of touch? Because, I mean...
I think to some extent they didn't think it through, but it also indicates that they're kind of desperately flailing. They're giving an impression of being calm and in control. But I think behind the scenes, what you're seeing is the UAE and the Saudis flailing. They're reaching out at everything without thinking it through. They're really desperate at this point. It is like a drowning man reaching for anything he can reach. This is a non-starter, though, and I think that the Israelis need to make it very clear in some symbolic way that the Golan, in any circumstance, in any possible way, is no longer a negotiable issue. So in other words, I would, just to shore up the answer to whether there's some peace deal that America can now seize onto to throw Israel back on its heels, I would escalate and accelerate Israeli settling of the Golan Heights right now.
All right, well, all right, let's,
Okay, so I would highly go subscribe to her channel, listen to her show. She's put up like 3 in the last week because there's so much going on. And then this kind of weird news the other day, Turkey had the Khashoggi murder took place at the Saudi embassy in Istanbul. This journalist, so-called journalist, he was really a propagandist. And he was killed, cut up in pieces, and they've arrested people. They were starting the trial this week in Istanbul, and Erdogan or whoever in charge gave the order to move it back to Saudi Arabia. And that's kind of, so that sort of leads me to believe that there's some kind of rapprochement taking place between Saudi Arabia and Turkey, which would be pretty significant, pretty significant. So a lot of things in the air. We'll talk more about it, and if I have time, I probably won't do a midweek this week because I've got some other things to do. But look, this is all just happening very, very quickly, very quickly. Here's the last thing I'll end with. So the question always comes is, well, this is from a Arab newspaper, Al-Quds newspaper on April 8th. Israel intends to increase gas exports to Europe because Europe needs gas because Russia's cutting off the gas. And then some people link to this and say, oh, well, look, this is Times of Israel. The EU is funding construction of an Israel-Cyprus-Greece electricity cable, so we'll just do the gas the same way. But the gas is not going to flow soon. They don't have the liquefied natural gas facilities, either in the Middle East or in Europe. They can't even get our gas there. Okay, and we have more facilities than they do in the Mediterranean. So I don't see that this is a game changer yet. I mean, electricity, it's different. Gas, you're talking 9,000 feet deep ocean that these gas pipelines would have to be laid. That's years away, and it's going to take a while to build the facilities. Everybody is stuck in a big, big mess, and it's going to be very volatile. I do believe that there will be food shortages. There'll be supply chain issues. Act wisely. Act wisely. Okay, so look, eventually Jesus comes back and wraps it all up, and we look forward to that. But you need to stand firm, as Romans says. Stand firm in the faith and act like men. Saw a lot of examples this week of men who were not acting like men. And when I say men, I mean men. Very troubling. But look, God's in control, and I know we know how it ends. So let's pray. Lord, we pray that you will comfort us, guide us with your Spirit, give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us, and to try as much as we can to help explain the things that are going on in the world. And that you will calm us. We don't have the spirit of fear, but of power. And we just pray that you'll help us to remember those promises that you've made to us that are very comforting, and that we would rely on those and not some man to solve the problems. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.